Every parent does the same thing. And I often talk to people like this who have a hang up about their own parents and the stuff that's passed on to them. Think about it. Every parent says, I will not pass on the shit that happened to me to my kids. That's what they intend to do. Good intentions. The thing I say to everybody now is, it doesn't work that way. It's not that easy. If it was that easy, none of this shit would be passed on. The problem, all of the generations before us and people in our generation who are not doing this work, maybe for the person listening, if you are not doing this work, I guarantee you, this is not a possibility. It's not you might pass stuff on. You are passing on the stuff that you don't like about your parents to your children. You just don't know you're doing it because it's subconscious in the same way that they passed it on to you. And if, when you think about it logically, no parent that I've ever seen or come across has purposefully said, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pass on all the crap I had from my parents to my kids. No one does that. And yet that's what happens because it's all going on subconsciously. And that's where the compassion comes in and the taking responsibility that we touched on last time. As soon as you take responsibility and go, shit, I'm passing this on as well, then you can have more compassion for people who are above you and pass it down to you.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Mental Purpose Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Lobos. Look, today, Paul Cope is my guest. And for those of you that know that name, Paul has been on before. His episode was called, It's Not a Trauma, It's a Programming Experience. It's the most highly rated episode that we have to date. And not just that, it's the one that most people quote to me. Or say, hey, it's my favorite episode, or hey, I love that one. The trauma, it's not a trauma, it's a programming experience. So I decided to reach out to Paul and say, hey man, we need to talk again. It's been a year. Let's talk from a place of where both of us are as men, as evolved men, as men who have grown and learned and experienced things over the last year. Let's talk from that perspective. And it was an incredible conversation. So much depth here. So before you invest your time, I'm going to tell you what you're going to experience, and then you can make that decision. You know my commitment. I'm not going to drop anything that's not great for you. So here it is. We're going to talk about programming and a lot of programming and what it means and how we get it. One of the things we're going to be talking about is the programming of the programmers. Just think about that. The programming of your programmers and having compassion for your parents and their parents and who programmed them that then programmed you. Understanding and having compassion for how they got their programming and where that came from is really important to clearing out your past programming and starting fresh. Cool? We're going to talk about, being in flow, taking care of yourself, putting yourself first, the duality in life. We're going to talk about being flawed. And even in the coaching journey, you're never going to be perfect. You're never going to be not affected by something. You might be able to get through something faster. You might be able to ignore that thing that used to piss you off and now it doesn't anymore. It's still going to affect you in some capacity. You just now have new skills, new habits, new mindset, all around that, right? We're going to be talking about depression and anxiety, talking about really, really making time for you. We're going to talk about switching the question of it's the language that you use when you put your question into the search engine. And I'm talking like the search engine of your brain. Why should I do this versus why shouldn't I do this? Or I need to take a vacation versus I don't have time, I can't do it. What are all the reasons why I can't take a vacation? And then the search engine that is your brain brings it up and says, hey, this is why, and confirms. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk very specifically about language and environment. And those being massive, obviously programming and beliefs are huge. We're going to talk about language and environment being a massive part of your life and how little changes, right? This isn't big strides. This is little changes. I talk a lot about the little changes that I've made in my environment, whether it's at my house or I go leave my office and go in my car and work for a couple hours or a couple days. The environment and the language are so crucial to your results. Really want you to take a look at your language and your environment, specifically having to do with your programming or having to do with the results of your life. So that's that. And then I give a really cool Tyler Perry kind of quote at the end about, people being there for certain seasons of your life, and like rocket boosters peeling off because they can't get to the orbit that you're getting to, right? That you intend to get to. So we're gonna talk about all that stuff and more. Paul's such a great guest. You guys are gonna have such a great time. Before we jump into that, remember, menonpurpose.net is our everything you need about mental purpose, the show notes, the information about our courses, our courses to find your purpose, the courses to find yourself, your authentic self, to work through all your past programming, to have a better relationship with your spouse, to make more money. All that stuff's in there. All of our free stuff's in there. A one-on-one coaching program and our retreats are in there too. So menonpurpose.net, everything you need. If you haven't yet, also please join the Men on Purpose community on Facebook. That's starting to ramp up, and we're getting a lot of traction there too. And that's it. Enjoy this episode. Thanks for listening. All right, Paul, back for round 2, man. Part 2 of It's Not a Trauma, It's a Programming Experience, part 2. I'm telling you, I told you before we started recording, that has been the one most common used or quoted, or the most used quote from any podcast I've ever done. When people talk to me like, hey man, I love this episode. It's not a trauma, it's a programming experience. Like, just that thing that you said alone sparked this whole, additional discussion with so many people that reach out to me. So I wanted to have you back because, like we were saying earlier, now that you and I are a year more evolved, what can we talk about and give to the audience now? And that's just, I'm super curious about that.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you for having me back on to begin with. I
Absolutely.
loved our conversation a year ago, and I was very flattered. It's always a really bizarre thing for me. I'm sure you have a similar experience to this. When you go from not talking publicly to talking publicly, and then you have people say things to you like quoting you back to yourself and saying, "Oh, that really helped me." There's always this part of me that's like, really.
Yeah.
So I have people, some people say to me who like listen to my podcast over here, part of my community, they'll say that, their husband or their wife gets sick of them saying, well, Paul Hope says this. And my voice, I had a friend who walked into a room and my voice was playing on this person's radio. And she was like, how is my friend on your radio? And they're like, oh, I listen to his podcast. And it just blew my friend's mind, and it still blows my mind that this happens all around the world, and I feel very privileged and very honored. So I'm glad it had an impact.
Yeah, I mean, that's programming in itself. We're programmed that, podcasts are just something that you do to just, talk to other people and get your voice out there. And it's one of the mediums that you use for authority, or, if you want to write a book or you have a podcast or you do this other thing for authority. Just to get your message and your voice out there. And the program is like, well, it's not real radio. It's not over the broadcast airwaves like a traditional radio station. So, how many people are listening? How many people are really going to get this? And, the Men on Purpose podcast itself is almost at 300 episodes, 140 with me as the owner of it. The first 160 episodes were junk, honestly, and I scrapped them because they just didn't work. And I was fighting my own programming, saying, if you scrap those episodes, you'll lose your SEO, you'll lose everything that was valuable about this podcast, which the podcast wasn't valuable except for the name, which is all I valued, and that's what I took, and I scrapped the other stuff and fought myself on that. Still think it was a good idea. And programming shows up in so much. Like, you were mentioning a story about your dad and about, and I said, I started to listen to the episode this morning just to kind of get familiar with what we had talked about. And I stopped it like 5 minutes in, because I don't mind if we repeat, because who we are today as the evolved versions of us, it won't be said the same. It won't be received the same. It won't be the same, even if it's the exact same word for word, which it probably won't be. And you said, here's some of my programming.
Yeah, absolutely. My dad used to, it was a vivid thing for me growing up. He would say the same thing over and over again. You'd sit around the family dinner table and he would tell a story. I've got a big sister who's a couple of years older than me, and we'd look at each other and he would tell a story as if he'd never told it before. I mean, my sister knew the story so well, we could tell the story ourselves. Like he'd literally told it thousands of times, not once or twice. And he would tell it as if we'd never heard it before, but he wouldn't acknowledge that he'd said it before. So I realized I still have and had this paranoia of repeating myself. So when I started doing coaching and things, I'd constantly be saying, and I still do it now. It's one of the things I still have to work on. Have I told you this before? Have I said this before? And then, as I said to you earlier, when I got into the coaching world, I realized, and it was one of my first coaches who I loved in New York, told me this once. He said, Paul, coaching is just saying the same thing over and over again until the person you're saying it to gets it.
Yes.
Because you'll say it in a different way next time and it'll suddenly land. And so it's one of those things I'm completely changing my programming about. I'm going from one extreme to the other, from a fear of saying the same thing again and again to unashamedly saying to people, I will repeat this over and over again until you understand it deep inside your soul, not just in your mind. Because that's something else I realized, that a therapist said this to me once. You can learn things inside. Like, and I used to say to people, I get something intellectually. I can understand it intellectually, but I don't feel like it's a part of me yet. And this therapist said to me, there's a train of thought that unless you are doing it, you don't know it. And that's something I love. And you can't know something and do it unless you practice it again and again and again, especially when the programming experiences thing is huge. I still talk about it all the time. When I started doing this work properly in my life when I was 38 years old. So I had 38 years, probably millions and millions and millions of programming experiences repeated. Think about that, Joe, with a parent. How many times in your childhood, especially when you're living with them 24/7, they're doing the same thing over and over again, and it's being repeatedly pumped into you. Yeah. And we think, and people often get frustrated with this, we think you can just change overnight. You can't. We're not laptops. You can't just wipe it clean and start again. We have to slowly undo all of that programming and replace it with something else, which means doing it over and over again.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is in the moment, you can make a change. In the moment, transformation can happen in that moment. It takes a long time for it to seep through and percolate down into the depths of the conscious or subconscious and conscious and unconscious minds. It takes time. Yet at every moment, you have the power to make a different choice. That's where transformation can happen instantly. However, if you go back and you don't let it soak in, it didn't do anything. Yeah. Just didn't do anything. And I like to tell people, guys, I'd be a multi-billionaire if I could figure out how to talk to you once on Zoom and your entire life is different. And it could be if you made every single choice of every single moment of your life differently and more serving than the last ones that you made that got you the results that you didn't want, maybe that could work. Yet, like you're talking about, how reinforced are all of those programs that were, household, school, TV, just those three alone were major contributors and probably took up, what do you think, like an 80% mind share of a young person, even into like your teenage years. Then you go to college and you get programmed if you go to college, or you go to a job and you get programmed even more. And programming is literally like, it's the name of the game. It's what's being done to you by, society and credit card companies and Amazon and all these companies that want you to buy stuff and think that you need their stuff and why, and, creative marketing tactics. And then you're programmed in school, everything's programming. Just go walk outside and look at billboards. Those are programming. It's teaching you that you need this. Why? I didn't even know. I didn't even know that product was a thing. And now I realize I need it. 6 seconds ago, I didn't know that. So we are constantly, I don't want to say fighting programming. We are constantly up against potentially non-serving programming from day one of our lives, right? Would that be a fair assessment?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, something I always say, from like the second you come out into this world, you are a pure human. There is nothing wrong with you when you were born. You are pure. You don't know that anything isn't good enough. You don't think that any part of you isn't good enough. And one of the first things any grown-up human says to a baby human is, "Don't cry."
Yeah.
That's a programming experience. We don't even know we're doing it. We say it very innocently, but I still have to fight the urge when I see someone crying to say to them, "Don't cry." And I've replaced that now with cry as much as you need to, because even that as a programming experience from a very young age, being told not to cry
Yeah.
tells us that there's something wrong with this purely perfectly natural thing that's happening, and that programming experience in itself tells us we're not good enough as we are, and that's right from the beginning, right from
Yeah.
the moment we land here.
Yeah. Probably land here. It's true. So true. And you don't know. See, what I want to get into with you today is the programming of the programmer, right? The programming of the programmer. So the programming that our parents were programmed by, who were our programmers, and like our grandparents, and they're programming from different generations, different times, technology differences, those kind of things. It's interesting to look at how our programmers were programmed to understand how we were programmed.
Yeah.
You know, and you have to. You can't just write your parents off. You can't do that. They programmed you, and you've got to understand where they were coming from, because a lot of guys that I talk to have anger or resentment toward their parents for a certain type of program that they're running or a certain type of result that they've gotten in their lives. And although you can forgive yourself and move on, there's still something that you have to address back there and clear, or it's coming along with you to every new present moment, even unconsciously, it's going to come along. So there's a compassion to understand that your parents didn't have a manual, even if they read What to Expect When Expecting and all these parenting books. Those people were programmed by programmers too. And so your situation is completely different. Your parents' situation completely different. So you gotta stop for a second and understand how you were programmed by your programmers and why. And when you do that, you'll understand your programming better and be able to let it go, I think, easier. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You used a word in the middle there, compassion.
Yeah.
Compassion is huge in this part of the personal growth world. I know we both talked last time of our mutual dislike of the traditional personal development world, having both been in it for so long in the past. Compassion is huge, and it was a big one for me as I was learning all about this stuff. Exactly what you just said. I remember at one point I sat down and chatted to my mum about her childhood and her upbringing, and she just told me some stories about her mum, my
Yeah.
nan,
Yeah.
and like if you talk about trauma, like we said
Yes.
last year, I had a very, if you write down and describe my childhood on paper, very nice, very middle class, very secure, no abuse. And then in my mid-30s, I still realized I had loads of problems. When I started talking to my mum about her childhood, and then going back another generation to my nan's childhood,
Yeah.
I was like, wow. Like, I'll share this one story, which I often share. My nan, who passed away probably 20 years ago now, she was from the generation of lived through the World War II. Literally, I always tell the story about when my mum was 70. My mum was 77 now, but when she was 70, I made her like a slideshow of her entire life, photos. So put together photos from when she was a kid all the way up to present day. And something I noticed in that slideshow was, which is a bit of a tangent, but makes the point, how slim everyone used to be 70 years ago. And what I realized was the diet that you're trying to get people back to now, if you want to live a healthy life, organic vegetables,
Right. Real.
balanced, real food. That's what they had. That's all they had 70
Right.
years ago.
Right.
That's all they ate. They would go to the shops and they would buy fresh vegetables every day because they didn't have lots of frozen food and they didn't have McDonald's and it just didn't exist. And they were all fairly healthy and slim. But one of the stories she told me about what happened to my nana, because as I'd heard stories growing up about my nana, what I realized as I got old was she had serious mental health issues. She just lived in an era when that just wasn't a thing. No
Yeah.
one talked about mental health issues in 1920. And one of the stories my mum told me about her mum was the eldest of about 9 children from a very traditional Irish Catholic background. and she had an elder sister who died when she was a child. So my nana was called Mary, and her elder sister was called Celia or Cecilia, and she died. And so my nana's mum, who, so we're going 3 generations back now,
Yeah.
said to my nana when she was young, "Why did God take my Cecilia away from me and leave me with you?"
Oh, geez.
And whenever I tell that story, everybody reacts the same way. It's like someone punches you in the gut. It's like, imagine being a child and that being said to you, the scarring that you would take with that. And that's just one story that my mum knows. Think about everything else that probably happened to my nana in that generation. She wasn't protected. There was no one looking out for her. There was no social services even back then to look after kids. And then she's grown up, and then she's had 6 kids of her own. She lost 3 children in childbirth. And then my mum was the eldest of those 6. So this stuff was just passed down. And at each generation, every parent does the same thing. And I often talk to people like this who have a hang up about their own parents and the stuff that's passed on to them. Think about it. Every parent says, "I will not pass on the shit that happened to me to my kids." That's what they intend to do. It's good intentions. The thing I say to everybody now is, it doesn't work that way. It's not that easy. If it was that easy, none of this shit would be passed on. The problem, all of the generations before us and people in our generation who are not doing this work, maybe for the person listening, if you are not doing this work, I guarantee you, this is not a possibility. It's not you might pass stuff on. You are passing on the stuff that you don't like about your parents to your children. You just don't know you're doing it because it's subconscious in the same way that they passed it on to you. And if, when you think about it logically, no parent that I've ever seen or come across has purposefully said, "Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pass on all the crap I had from my parents to my kids." No one does that. And yet that's what happens because it's all going on subconsciously. And that's where the compassion comes in, and the taking responsibility that we touched on last time. As soon as you take responsibility and go, "Shit, I'm passing this on as well," then you can have more compassion for the people who were above you and passed it down to you.
Yeah. And there's so much to dig into there, because all that stuff that you just said is, I mean, just think about one occurrence 3 generations ago, and forget about epigenetics. Forget about just the stuff that's in the cellular makeup and the energy in the cells of your blood from generations and what they dealt with. Mm-hmm. Then you have that verbal, that cognizant in the moment, where a child instantly says, "I'm not lovable, I'm not loved, and I'm not safe," right? And that is like the formula. Something's wrong here. Like, I'm not safe, I'm on my own. And their 6-year-old or 10-year-old brain starts to form this opinion that I'm not safe with these people. So there's a barrier that's now been put up. And then that goes on to love in general. Or it goes on to relationships, other relationships where you don't trust people because you think, are they really in it? Because my mom said this. Is this guy really in it? And so let's dig into that, because there's an easier way. Like I will say to people, there's an example that I know of that explains programming pretty easily in a very non-traumatizing or seem to be traumatizing sense, which is there's a 3 generations of women and they're making a Thanksgiving meal, and the grandmother, the mother, and the daughter, and the daughter and the mother are preparing a lamb leg. They're putting it in a pan, and the pan's huge, and the lamb leg fits in there nicely. Yet the mother is cutting off the end of the bone, right? Like let's say 6 inches off the bone. And the daughter says, "Why do you cut the leg off? It fits." And she said, "Just what my mother did." And they turn to the grandmother and they say, "Hey, why do you cut the leg off?" She goes, "Well, that's just what my mother did." And she goes, "Well, why?" He goes, "Well, because she didn't have a pan big enough, because they were dirt poor when they came to this country from Italy, and they didn't have a pan big enough. So they always cut the end off the leg." And you think about that and you go, Well, that's kind of silly, kind of stupid, kind of simple. Yet at the same time, that programming right there, unconscious, subconscious programming, literally is how so many aspects of your life work. When you think about like, why the hell did I just do that? Why did I just say that to my kid? Because that type of programming you have no idea why you do it. Yet 3 generations ago, they did it because they were too poor to get a bigger pan. Today, you do it because that's what generations have done, and you consider it tradition. Meanwhile, it's a program from a scarcity-based mindset.
Yeah.
You don't even realize that. You just think it's a cooking. It's just tradition in the kitchen from generations of my family. Yet, when you look back at those 3 generations ago who were cutting the lamb leg off because they didn't have a pan that was big enough, maybe they had alcoholism, or maybe they had a mindset where they couldn't get out of their own way and actually get a job to provide for the family in a more of a meaningful way. You don't know. That all came with the tradition of we just cut the leg off. That's it. I want you to really think about that, audience. It's so simple. Yeah, we want to start thinking about programming in those terms. How have you been programmed? What are the things you do today that don't serve you at all, probably never did serve you, yet you can start to illuminate them and subsequently eliminate them because they will not serve your life going forward. That's crazy to think about. How many things were programmed by that we don't even know.
It's phenomenal, and it's a simple and hugely powerful example. And for the people listening, if you're not already doing anything this in your life, I promise you, there's a whole career in it for you if you can grasp this.
Yeah.
And get good at it. Because when I go into businesses, it's the same thing. I was listening to Elon Musk talking about this in an interview a couple of weeks ago about when he goes into Tesla, and he goes to the factory floor, and he's speaking to people in the factory floor because he's looking at things with fresh eyes. He's never built cars before.
Yeah.
And when you look at anything with fresh eyes, you can just go to the childlike mentality.
Yeah.
Why do we cut off the bone? Nobody's asking that question.
Right.
He would say, why do we have this part of a car? And he was saying in this interview, he was being interviewed on a one-on-one thing, and he was laughing, saying, you would be amazed how many things are in normal cars that just do not need to be there.
Yeah.
Like they're completely redundant. And he said he would stand there because he's never done this before, and he would say to somebody, why is that thing on top of the battery? And the energy reduction team would say, it's nothing to do with us. It's the vibration team. The vibration team says it has to be there. So then he would go to the vibration team and say, this thing that we put on top of the battery, can we get rid of that? Do you have to have it for vibration reduction? And they'd say, it's not us. It's got nothing to do with us. It's the noise reduction team that has that. And he would go and speak to each team, and each team thought it was a different team. And at the end of the day, he was like, so nobody thinks we need this? And they'd go, oh no, we just thought it was somebody else. And he'd take it out, and he said, we were taking hundreds of bits out of cars that have just always been there, because every time, I remember when I set up my first business, it was a law firm. So what did I do? We needed documents. Like if you needed to transfer money from one client to another client, big business sale, you needed something to document it. So I took a document that I used. I used to work at huge international law firms. So in my mind, they're doing everything perfectly.
Sure.
They're huge. So I take the document that they use and I copy that. And then one day I'm sitting at my desk filling in this document thinking, I'm filling in like 20 boxes. There's only 5 of us working this company now. And as soon as I asked myself the question, why am I filling in this sheet? I changed it. It was a sheet that had about 150 boxes on it. You had to tick different things. And what I realized was that one document had been created over 50 years in this big firm.
Yeah.
Because someone would say, oh, we need another box for this. We need it. And once a box has been added, no one's coming along afterwards to say, a year later, do we still need that box?
Right.
So you end up with this really complicated sheet that actually, for the vast majority of transactions, you only need 5 boxes. So when you come with fresh eyes, and I just went from scratch and went with my law firm, forget everything I've learned before in the law firm I worked at. How can I do this so it works right now? Like I was working with a business coach, another example. In the law firm industry in the UK, you would do the work, then you would bill the client, and then they would have 30 days to pay. And then it would be another job in itself, chasing clients for money. This happens in so many businesses. This business coach came in, same thing, fresh eyes. He said to me, why don't you make clients pay up front? And I said to him, that's just not how it's done. And he went to me, why? And I laughed and said, I don't know. Yeah. That's just the way everybody else does it. And he said to me, well, why don't you do it differently then? You've already set up a law firm to be different to the mainstream. Why don't you do this differently? So overnight, I completely wiped out all cash flow problems inside the companies that I operate by saying to everybody, you pay me up front. And you would lose maybe 2% of clients. Because those clients who said to me, I'm not going to pay you up front, I would say, that's okay. You were never going to pay me anyway then.
Right.
So I don't want to do the work. If you want to buy something from Amazon, you have to pay them up front.
Right.
Most companies operate, you give me the money and then I give you the thing.
Yeah.
So why am I giving you, and especially when it's an information business, I give you all of my knowledge and then say to you, will you pay me? Most people then go, well, actually, there's someone else I've got to pay first over here. Right. You've already given me the thing I needed. And this is all part of the same stuff, going off on tangents again, but it's
still part of it.
Fresh eyes.
Yeah.
Looking at the same thing. This is programming in every aspect of your life, every single aspect.
Yeah. What do you think about, when you're talking about that, what I hear is how much of our lives are not run by us. They're run by the programs, and how much authenticity and revealing that authentic self that's under the armor and under the protection and under the avoidance and under all the bullshit programming that you've had from your past, your traumas, everything. Like understanding what that actually is, that suit of armor feels like you and it's not you, because the results you have for your life, if they aren't every single thing that you want, then clearly there's a program that you're running that doesn't equal the results that you know are possible. And you have to now illuminate and understand what part of me isn't me anymore. Oh, wow. A lot of it. Okay. And then you have to formulate a plan to eliminate it, to get rid of it. Or you're running the same formula, the same program, expecting a different result, which is insanity. And I think about, like, when you're saying that, I think about the amount of people that are like sheep's in a herd, right? Just following the next sheep. In the business world, in the investing world, in the real estate investing world, especially because that's just a world that I know really well. In the podcasting world, it's done like that. I do it like that. And then there's people that come along like you or I that have a little bit of natural defiance that say, I don't think that makes any sense. Why would I do it like that? That's dumb. Now, the defiance can get you in trouble, and you'll learn what probably should have worked, and you should have used that, and it is what it is. Maybe I'm just happier doing my own thing. And you'll also learn the most important piece, which is, this is what I like, and this is what I want to do, and this is a part of my formula, and I'm going to work this, and I'm at peace with that, and I become a model for somebody else. Just because someone else has done it doesn't mean it's a model for me. And that's something hard to wrap your head around. Just because they've done it doesn't mean it's a model for what I'd like to do, because maybe I'm a little bit different on the finish, or a little bit different on this, or different on that, or maybe I want to produce a car that doesn't have any buttons inside. Like a Tesla is a very weird thing to get into when you're used to a car that has buttons and lights and everything everywhere. And you have a half a steering wheel in the Plaid and a giant screen and these two paddles, and that's it. Your brain's like, something's wrong, something's missing. You know what I mean? And it all goes back to the authentic self. Doing the work to find that authentic you is the most important thing you can do. If you want clarity on what moves to make that are your own. I had a conversation with my social media managers this morning. And I said to them, I want to get one thing really clear. I am an introvert. No matter how much people want to deny it, I am majorly introverted. I have an expertise in this area, which allows me to free flow my passion and my power out of my mouth and with my hands and all that stuff, right? And it makes me look or sound extroverted. That I believe most of my life fought myself on believing and embodying and just being at peace with that introverted side of me and letting him just be. I fought myself and said, no, dude, no, how come you're extroverted over here and you hate people and crowds over here? And that's just you being insecure and you got to get over that. And I think honestly, man, I'll be 40 in a week. I think this year of my life, my 39th year, has been the first year I've ever just said, I'm an introvert and I'm okay with that. And if other people don't like that, that's okay too. And I'm going to build my business and my social media based on the fact that I don't want to share every single aspect of my life. I don't want to go down there every day and give you 3 steps for this and 10 steps for that and 22 steps for this. And here's what I have for breakfast. And this is why it applies to you. And this is what I'm like. That's just not something that I like to do. And so I said to my guys this morning, this is what I'm choosing. I'm choosing to use my voice in the most powerful way possible to impact the most amount of people. And I'm hoping that you guys don't tell me that also comes with you on video and posting shit 3 or 4 times a day just to be that person. And because that's not me authentically. And so they were like, no, dude, we support you. You're not going to post every day. You're not going to put constant calls to action out there. There are a couple because I am running a business. I do have to put a couple out there. Yet the work that I've done on myself over the last, just say 5 years, and you know this too, have helped me align with the authentic guy so much so that next week on my 40th birthday, all of the things that I imagined myself doing or going and experiencing, they actually don't matter because the only thing that I'm really celebrating is that I have revealed the most authentic version of me. And that is the biggest celebration you could ever imagine. And I have become so at peace with that it's like, wow, who was I thinking about? Like my 40th birthday has to be this like extravaganza grand event, how cool would it be just to spend it with my kids and just knowing intrinsically and inside that I've become the man I set out to be, being wise, not business wise, not money wise, not father wise, not husband wise. Me, Ian, the man, has become the man that I knew I was capable of being. That right there, dude, that right there eliminates 80% of the programming because now I know me and what I think and what I want. And where the programming comes from, I get to choose whether I'm going to allow it to program me and put me into the next phase or not. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, and I absolutely I love it, and I hope you give yourself loads of credit for that because that's something I bang on about all the time in this work is giving yourself credit for that work and for those breakthroughs is huge, and it ties into everything I believe in, which is when I was doing going through the first part of my change and life changes and learning things, I just came to the conclusion, and that's what the book we spoke about last time is about, is that my work ultimately all comes down to one thing, which is how we feel about ourselves inside. Call it self-esteem or self-worth, but basically the feeling that we're not good enough is what everything comes down to for me, which is why the book is called How to Solve Any Problem in Life. And I say to people, I can help you solve any problem. And marketers hate that because they say, no, you've got to be more specific.
Niche.
And I'm like, well, I don't know what to say to you because and you give me a problem and I'll walk you down the street to show you how it's all about how you feel about yourself deep inside. Because whatever the thing is at the top level, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's a relationship issue or something that's going on in the business you run or something that goes on in work or with your kids. It comes down to how you feel about yourself inside. And once you get to the point where you feel about yourself that you are good enough and who you are, exactly how you are is good enough, all of the other things fade away because all of a sudden that it's not that big a deal. Because what we come to realize is the reason we've got a problem with an employee in work is that we know we want to sack them, but we don't want to sack them because we worry what people will think of us if we sack them, and we worry what our dad would say about that if he found out we were just sacking this guy. And at the end of the day, it's like, no, I know in my soul this person isn't right for this position, and I can help them find a new job, and I can relocate them or whatever. But I know what I'm meant to do, and I'm okay with that. And it's the same if you're talking to your kids. Whenever I talk to people about parenting, people I know who parent who have good self-esteem, their kids don't irritate them. Their kids don't trigger them. Why? Because when a kid behaves like a kid and it's not triggering something deep inside you from your shit that's going on from your childhood, you
Yes.
can just smile at the fact that it's a kid being a kid.
Yeah.
And there are things that, you may have to discipline them, or you may have to teach them, or you may have to do something, but it doesn't make you shout and scream. It just makes you go, you're not allowed to do that, and this is why.
Yeah.
So it's not this big problem anymore. And it's incredible how often I come across things, and when I explain this to people, people who are prepared to look at themselves, that they come to the same place, which where you are is phenomenal, and I love it. And it's worth saying as well for the people listening, that doesn't mean you don't have any problems in life. It doesn't mean you don't face things. Like, since we last spoke, my year has been so challenging. Like, it's like the universe has gone, great, think you've got all the answers.
Yes.
Here, we're now on level 43 of the game.
Yeah.
You've got to level 42. You've done really well. Here's the next level with the next super baddie. See how well you do with this.
Yeah.
And I go, okay. And there are times when I'm smashing it because the work I've done and the training I've done, and I'm really proud of myself. And then every now and then I'll slip because something will come up from the 38 years of programming.
Right.
It'll come out and I'll be like, And then in those moments, because I know deep down I'm good enough, I can come back, I can apologize if I've done something wrong, I can make things better, and I can learn and move on. It's something that I think is really important, and I've realized this year as well. Really important to share with people that everybody is fallible. We are all flawed. And no matter how much of this work you do, something I don't like about the superstars in the personal development space is they tend, whether they intend to or not, they tend to come across as though they've got it all figured out. If you do what they say, you'll just live this dream life and it'll just be lovely every day. That's just not how it works. It's just not how life works. There will always be happiness and sadness, and there has to be. This is something else I talk about a lot now. You've got to have that duality. Yeah. If you don't have sadness, you can't have happiness. So it's not even that, people talk about positive and negative emotions, and a long time ago I was like, no, emotions are just what we've been trained they are. Sadness can be beautiful if you understand it properly, and you know what it exists for, even if you only think it exists so it's the flip side of happiness. Yeah. But you should value when you feel sad, because you can't experience happiness without sadness. So when you feel sad, it's not just something to put up with. You can say, I actually quite like feeling sad. And I have those moments now when I'm at my best, where I'm like, I feel down today, or I feel sorry for myself today, or I feel a bit depressed today. What's good about this? It means I need to sit inside, watch TV, and not do any work today. Eat some ice cream, eat some chocolate, look after the little boy inside me who just needs someone to put their arm around his shoulders and say, it's okay today. Take a day off. Yeah. That's okay. Yeah. That's all part of it.
For the last month, I've been on and off sick. And I'm not sure if there's ever been a time in my life where I've allowed myself to just lay down. Like the first week of November, I was sick and lost my voice, had to cancel all my coaching calls, cancel podcast recordings. And my wife was like, why don't you just go lay down? I'm like, because we're the company's growing and I've got so many little things to take care of. And then I thought to myself, okay, you know what? I'm not going to run from this. I'm not going to try and outwork this or ignore it. I am just going to sit with it, and I'm going to figure out what it's telling me. And I think there's a maturity and a level of peace that comes when you can sit with yourself and not distract yourself, not run around and avoid dealing with certain things. I sat there for a good part of a week and just laid around the house. And I got a couple things done, but I emailed my team, texted my team and said, hey, I'm down for the week. Like, I'm feeling like crap. And then last week or the week before it came back. Last week it came back again. I was down all weekend, not this past week and the weekend before. And I started to develop a habit of, I'm okay. If I need to take some time, I'm just going to take some time. Even though my company's in a crucial part of scaling right now, it's what it looks like a year ago. Man, it's night and day difference. absolutely night and day. And I know the duality of the guy that, quote unquote, never got sick and was always going, popping Tylenols and doing whatever I had to do to just get through it. And then the guy today that's like, hey, I'm not feeling good. And I don't need to prove anything to you. I don't need to prove anything to anybody. I'm not that tough. I'm working through some challenges. Clearly something's manifesting up in my body. Cool. I'm going to work through it. And being sick the second time, like 2 weeks ago, allowed me to start thinking about my birthday and thinking, you know what? I don't actually need to go do anything. The celebration is just who I am. And that's not, and then all of a sudden this voice was like, yeah, that's a little avoidancy, man. That's a little escapey. I think you're going to regret not doing something that you've always planned on, you've always dreamed of, you always marked this occasion. And I was like, no, I think I'm at peace with that. I'm at peace with just doing nothing, just being me, because I get to start this next decade as this guy. That is the biggest celebration ever, because any of those shit that I want in my life, the doings, all of that will come from who I am and the company that I created and the brand I created and the man I created and the family dynamic I created. All that comes from that. So it all goes back to, you must do the work on the human. The human must get the priority. You, audience, you got to put you first. If you look at your schedule and it does not say me, personal, or self first, your schedule's backwards. And you can tell me all day long how, man, I've got this job and I got a side hustle and all this stuff and I'm so busy. You are not that busy to spend 20 or 30 minutes with yourself doing the work on you that radiates into every single thing else you do, right, Paul? Like that's it. It's the only way. And the thing that the work does is it doesn't cure all of the problems. It helps you with formulas like the stuff that I do. It helps you with formulas to get through the shit faster. Right? Just get through the shit faster. And maybe it stings less and maybe it hurts less, or maybe it doesn't take you down for as long.
100%.
Yep.
And that's the key for me. It's, it's something where at the depths of my darkness 5 years ago, something would trigger me. I'd feel depressed for 3 months. Now, 5 years later,
wow.
Yeah, 5 years later, the same thing can happen. I might feel depressed for a day.
Yeah.
Now, I've coached people through stuff like this where they would then say, well, that's the failure. I'm like, why? And they'd be like, because I shouldn't feel depressed at all. I'm like, we've got all kinds of problems in this.
Right.
You're expecting to, firstly, get rid of a perfectly normal human emotion from your life that exists for a reason. Why does it exist? Let's come back to that in a second. And secondly, you're expecting to go from where you were, which was depths of despair and suicidal thoughts, to nothing. That's unrealistic. And we see this throughout society, this unrealistic expectations and unrealistic goals in so many different aspects of what we see. Things are so black and white and so extreme. We've lost so much nuance. And the reality is, you've probably heard this, but again, one of those things that's worth repeating again and again, because some people I still come across who've never heard this little analogy. I first heard it from Simon Sinek, the author, years ago, but it's the oxygen mask on the plane. Yeah. Which is, when they're giving the safety talk on a plane and they say if the oxygen masks come down, who should you put it on first?
You.
And the correct answer is you put it on yourself first. Why? Well, if you don't put it on yourself first, you're going to be dead at some point. So if you've got a few kids that you're trying to help, by the time you get to the second or third, maybe you won't be here anymore, and that's not good for anyone. And it's an extreme example, and I've heard him say life's not that extreme. And part of me goes, I disagree, because the reality is, whatever roles you have in life, and we all have multiple roles, if you do not look after yourself first, you cannot be the best version of you in any of your roles.
Right.
And you may be able to get away with it for a while. You and I have both done this. We've both experienced it. And it sounds like we've both done it in recent times as well. You push it, you'll take some painkillers, you'll get through those sleepless nights. But sooner or later, and the further down this path people go, they tend to believe more and more. I definitely do, in the power of the universe and lessons coming through and things like that. Sooner or later, the universe will come along and slap you around the face.
Yes.
and say, I've been trying to tell you. I'll give you an example happened to me literally only a few weeks ago. I've had a heavy 3-4 months. My dad got ill at the beginning of the year. It's a sad story, but it's worth sharing this stuff, I think. He got cancer, and then he decided to stop treatment, and then I went round to their house one day. Mum and dad lived together, and he was really ill, so I moved in with them. And I'm 42 years old now.
Yeah.
The time for me to stay in the same house as my parents is long gone, and I have a limited tolerance for being able to do that. I moved in with them to help look after him. He deteriorated. He passed away, and then I stayed living with my mum to support her.
Yeah.
But I'd been there for 3 months. And in the middle of that, I'm still trying to run my business and do my things. And I'd scaled that down because I always say to people, humans are not designed to be able to deal with all of this stuff at once. So if you write down on a list all this stuff you've got going on, and it's heavy stuff, you need to prioritize 1 or 2 things and try and scale back the rest. Otherwise, you're just going to collapse. And something I learned from a coach about 1.5 years ago now, 2 years, was that people who work for themselves especially, when you work for a company and they say you've got X number of days holiday a year, there is somebody monitoring your number of days holiday. And you get to the end and you think, oh, I haven't taken my days holiday, I need to take them. When you work for yourself, it's very easy to just go, I don't need a holiday.
Right.
And one of my coaches said to me, it's really important, because I developed this new story, a new program, that because I've changed my life and I don't work full time, I don't need holidays, because I don't work Mondays and I don't work Fridays. But what I'd forgotten was, because I work myself, I might not work Monday and Friday, but I do work Saturday, and I do sometimes work Sunday.
Yeah.
And Tuesday nights I'm working, and I'm up early on Wednesday. And he said to me, it's really important that you schedule into your own life holidays. So after we'd had this talk, I went through my calendar for the year, and every 8 weeks, I decided 8 weeks is about my run rate, Joe.
Threshold, yeah.
Sprint. Yeah. So every 8 weeks, I just blocked out in my calendar 1 week off, 1 week off. And it came to that 8 weeks about 6 weeks ago now. And I saw the 8 weeks in my calendar, and I went to myself, I know I'm meant to take a week off, but I can't. I've got too much on. I'm looking after my mum. I'm picking my business back up after the few months I've had off. Dealing with a new relationship, I need to give that more attention. New stepkids in that relationship, I need to give them some attention. So I didn't take the week off. At the end of that week, I was having a bath to try and relax. As I got out of the bath, I passed out and fell. Luckily, because this happened to me before, I'd sort of sat down on the side of the bath, then on the toilet, but still passed out, banged my head and gave myself concussion.
No.
Ended up in hospital, and they gave me a brain scan. Everything was clear, but as the doctor in the hospital said this to me in the accident and emergency department, equivalent of your ER, as he said this to me, it was the way I pictured it was the universe tapping me on the head and saying, I've been trying to tell you this, so we're going to do it officially. The doctor said to me, you have to take some time off. No screens, no phones, no phone calls. That's it. You're off. And I went and I smiled to myself, and I went home and laughed. And I said to the universe, thanks. Because it was literally the week before should have been my scheduled week off. And I ignored it. So the universe came in and slapped me on the face and said, take a week off. And this is the key. We have to, because I'd reached that point where I can't be the best version of me to help look after my mum, or to be the best partner, or to be the best coach. Right. If you're trying to coach somebody, you know what that's like. Yeah. And you're feeling pulled from all parts and you're not feeling your best. It's so difficult to give that person the space they need and the time they need and the attention they need. So at that point, I was like, right, break, take some time, recharge, and then come back.
And it's challenging to do that. We're not sitting here denying that. It's challenging to do that, especially as an entrepreneur. I building a business, building a coaching business, I have a lot of one-on-one clients, I have groups, I have masterminds that I'm hosting. So like a week off for me it's logistically doesn't work right now. Plus I got kids, plus I got all this stuff going on, plus I got a little Turo business I'm running. There's a lot of little stuff going on. And so the answer isn't can't take a vacation now. That's not the answer, right? Or the universe will bring you what you asked for. I have guys all the time to come to me and go, yeah, man, I really want to quit my job, really can't. And then the universe goes, I'll help you quit your job. I'll get you fired.
Yeah.
You know, or I'll get your position, terminated or downsized or whatever. And then you get to stand there in that space and go, oh shit, this is what I wanted. Oh God, this is scarier than I thought. What do I do? So like I changed environments. I moved from Baltimore to Los Angeles, which I think is paradise. Then I can be at the beach every day in exactly between 20 minutes and 2.5 hours. And I say that only because of LA traffic, man. I'm 8 miles from the beach. And one day it took me 2.5 hours to get home. Some days it takes me 20 minutes. And so every third week I work from my car from a different spot around LA, mountains, ocean, city, sitting down in Beverly Hills, sitting in West Hollywood, sitting down at the Grove and the farmer's market, like just a different energy. And I find it's enough for my brain to remove me from like this studio, sitting here every day in front of my computer every single day. Dude, I bought a little table that fits over my steering wheel for my laptop, and I work from my car. And I think it's just awesome. And then every weekend, every afternoon, we're doing something, right? We are technically going on some kind of trip or vacation almost every day, which helps that piece of, I have a growing business. I can't really just take off a week. I have clients that count on me. And now the other thing my coach said to me is, hey, as your business scales, man, you're getting busier and busier and busier. How are you going to plan for time for you, more time for you? And I thought, I think every 4 weeks, I'm just going to have no calls, no masterminds, no group coaching, nothing. Like Ian's off and I lay on the couch and I can watch TV for a week, or I can go to Hawaii, or I can go to the beach and just chill. So I'm building that into my calendar just to know this is what I need, because there's too much momentum from what we've done, too much being like momentum being built up. We can't go down, like that's a problem. It's a huge problem. Forget about all the programming and all the hustle and grind mentality that we have somewhere, buried in there that we've been taught, and luckily shed most of it. Yeah, dude, I completely agree with you. The universe will put you down if you don't listen.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny because it does tie back into programming, because that question inside your head, and I literally had to check myself with it the other week. I always say inside our heads is like a Google search engine. And the way most people put questions into their own Google search engine is they'll put it in like this: give me all the reasons I can't take a holiday right now, or give me all the reasons I can't take a break, or give me all the reasons I can't recharge. And of course, Google, your brain works exactly the same way Google does. It will give you the search results you ask for. Whereas if you say, and I was doing that to myself the other week, whereas if you say, how can I do the thing I want to do? You then come up with all of these creative ideas. I was the same. I can't take a week. I can't go away. I wanted a holiday. I can't. Well, what I can do is get an Airbnb just down the road.
Yeah.
And take a few days out, or just take a weekend there. And me and my girlfriend go there, and we'll just have a couple of nights together. Yeah. Same as you say that. I love that idea of driving and being in different spots. And even as you said then about the thing over the steering wheel, my brain went, okay, make a note of that. I didn't know you could
I'll send you a link.
That's a great idea, because I've thought a similar thing. When I've got when I'm living with my mum to help support her, I really need space. I'm the same as you. I'm an introvert who trained himself to be an extrovert, and people, I have the exact same problem. People are like, no, you're an extrovert.
Extroverted introvert.
You can't tell me what I am. Like I know I like to sit by myself a lot. I know what.
Yes.
And it dawned on me a few weeks ago, my private space that I've got when I don't live by myself is my car. So that is a solution, is a great idea. So for the person listening, this is the thing. There's always ways around stuff. There's always a solution. There's always something creative you could do. But you've got to change the question you put into the search engine. And that's part of the programming as well. Because most of us will have had the programming, but it just is the way it is. Life is just the way it is. Like, life is shit. Life is hard. You're meant to be unhappy. You're meant to do this until you're 65 or 70. You know, you're meant to be in an unhappy relationship. That's just what everybody has. Kids are meant to upset you. When you challenge all of this programming and all of these stories, that's when life gets really interesting.
It's language we're talking about. And this applies for guys that are retired, guys that have sold their businesses, guys that have gotten this financial freedom, guys that have exited the traditional wheel, let's say, right? I had this talk with a buddy of mine a couple of weeks ago. The programming doesn't end because you got quote unquote financially free. This is the conversation I have with a lot of guys who are seeking financial freedom. And I'm like, seek personal internal freedom. Financial freedom comes and then your ass is free. Because now you can sit on a beach and do nothing, or you can go invest in another company, or you can go and do the hobby stuff that you always wanted to do. And you needed you want to learn how to fly a jet airliner. Well, you need a lot of hours in training, and now you've got the time for that. Or you want to learn how to race cars. Now you got the time for that. The programming you drag along, if you're not changing the one thing that Paul, you're saying is language. Like, change the question you input into the search engine sounds so simple, and it's not. It is very complex, and it has a lot of result to it that you probably want. You just don't realize how much that impacts. Language and environment are two things that we just talked about in the last 20 minutes. I change my environment constantly because sometimes my own home is not the most productive or conducive environment for what I need in that moment. And I'm listening to myself and my body. So like my car gets back from Maturo today, tomorrow and Wednesday, I don't have podcasts. So I'm on coaching calls down in, I'll pick a place. I might go to the beach. I haven't seen the beach in like a week and a half. I might go to the beach. It's cold as hell here too. Well, it's 50. Let's be honest. It's 50. I'm programmed.
Remember you speaking to someone in the UK.
I know. I'm programmed from the East Coast where it's like brutal. Not brutal compared to anybody talking from Canada or Minnesota. They were brutal enough. I don't like the cold, so they're brutal enough for me. Out here, I've taken that programming off that 19 degrees is cold and 50 and rainy is cold and miserable. So just a new set of programming. Anyway, I'm going to change my environment and I'm going to make sure that I'm watching my language. In our MOP life formula, and audience, if you don't know what that is, hit me up on Instagram or go on mentalpurpose.net and you'll find some stuff that you can download. Our MOP life formula has environment and language as one of the first two pieces or components of the formula that equals the result of your life. Remember, personal development is quantifiable. You can measure it if you're formulaic about it. So when you add environment and you add language together, if you are in a shitty, non-conducive environment and your language literally is putting you backward at every moment and you're expecting a different result, you now illuminated the part of your formula that is no longer working. And so you have to ask yourself, well, where can I go? And when can I go there? And what can I do? And who can I talk to? When do I want to get it done by? Where, all the who, what, when, where, why enrollment questions, you now have the opportunity and it's your responsibility to go do that. Ask yourself those questions. How do I change my environment? And what language can I use that will get me a different result here? That's on you. That's change in a moment, right? That's your job. Responsibility, accountability, whatever you want to call it. That's on you as a human.
Yeah, absolutely. And language, I mean, you mentioned environment as well. They're two huge things. Language, something I always say to people, and in my previous life in the traditional personal development world, I became an NLP practitioner and loved it, and I still do. And a big part of NLP is language, and combine that with, I was a lawyer. Being a lawyer is all about language, very specific language. Like, as lawyers, you will have an argument about whether the comma should come before the and or after the and, or it's crazy what the detail you get into. But when you get into this world, it helps you, because I see this even in debate. I see people having debates on TV about things and big arguments, and I'm like, you haven't even defined what you're talking about.
Right.
You haven't even, without going down rabbit holes. So there'll be a conversation about racism. And they don't even say at the start of the conversation, this is what we mean by racism.
Right.
This is what we're talking about. So everyone's having these big arguments, and you think, you don't even know you're talking about the same thing.
Right.
Because you all mean different things. And this translates into your relationships.
Yeah.
It translates into every aspect of your life, into your work. The number of times, if you can just say to somebody, when you said X, what did you mean?
Yeah.
Because when I hear that word, This is what I think. And the number of times you can do that and you'll realize you're talking about completely different things with someone, and that's why you've got a disagreement or an argument. And then you bring that to yourself. I always say to people, and this is an NLP thing, the words that are coming out of your mouth are just an insight into what's going on in your brain.
Yeah.
Like, and what's coming out of your mouth is usually about 10-20% of how strong it is inside your brain. So if you're talking negatively about yourself outwardly, inside here is
10x.
10 times that. Yeah. Easy. And then your environment is massive. Something I say to people all the time is, you can do this work as much as you want. And I've coached a lot of people. When I started doing this work, I changed my environment. I got rid of businesses. I left a marriage. I even moved out of the country for a while. I've coached many people who have done this work and not changed anything of their environment. They stayed in the same job, in the same relationship, in the same location.
Yep.
And something I've realized over time, every one of those people, no matter how much progress they made, and some of them made ridiculous progress, sooner or later, their environment comes back to bite them. Because the very simple analogy I always give is, this work allows you to put your hand in a fire and to keep it there for a bit longer than you used to be able to. But that doesn't mean we want to stand with our hand in a fire. So, for example, I couldn't go back now to be a corporate lawyer. That environment,
you know too much.
It would not be conducive to the life I want to live.
Right.
I just couldn't do it. So if I stay in that environment, I'm not going to be able to be the person I want to be and live the life I want to live. Another example I had, it was a guy I was coaching in. He was a head chef of a restaurant in Dubai, and he was doing great work and he was doing really well. And then he hit a ceiling, and I said to him, "But where do you want to go from here?" And he said to me, "The picture I have in my head is being like a Zen monk." And I said to him, "Okay, brilliant. Describe to me what you see. What does the picture look like?" And he described what everybody probably pictures the same thing: a bald guy in a robe in the Himalayas.
Yeah.
And I said to him, "Yeah, I see it. It looks very Zen, looks very peaceful, feels very peaceful." I went, "How many of those guys have you ever seen run a restaurant in Dubai?"
Yeah.
And he said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "You take any one of those Zen monks and put them in your work environment. I give them 10 minutes before they break.
Right.
You're already way more peaceful than they are in your environment. You're like a Jedi inside that restaurant, but you cannot stay inside that environment and expect to progress past where you are, because it's not designed for that. You've got to make a choice at some point. And it's okay if you want to stay there. If you want to stay as a head chef in a busy restaurant for whatever reasons, that's okay. But get to a place where you're at peace with where you are.
Yeah.
Because you can't achieve the thing you've got in your head. It's expectations again. The story you're telling yourself about where you want to be, it's just not feasible to do that inside where you are.
No. And there's a part of it that comes with, like, our formula, the MOP, purpose-driven formulas: illuminate, eliminate, calibrate equals acceleration. So no more grind and hustle. Acceleration happens naturally when those other three pieces are working. And so you're illuminating the things that are working and not working. And you are crazy if you think you can't change your environment, or that you can stay in the same environment, right? And some of that is your physical environment in the house, your room, your car. It's in your head, the environment in your head, the environment you create at your office or your job. There's a lot of different environments there. You have to take a look at all of them. Then you have to look at how language plays in. And those are just two aspects. Forget about beliefs and programming. Beliefs and programming affect those two things. That's like another layer. And it is crazy. And I'll tell you, you have to become at peace with letting go of things that don't serve you anymore. There's a great speech from Tyler Perry, and he says, some people are meant to be with you for a moment, a week, a month, a lifetime. And most people aren't going to be comfortable with the altitude that you take them to. So just like a rocket booster, they're going to go with you and they're going to peel off. And I think this year, I was thinking about it, this year, I've eliminated the most amount of people out of my life, and it's been the best year ever. People that don't serve anymore, that I don't serve anymore, that aren't going to where I'm going. And so they peeled off. Halfway, first month, I peeled a couple boosters off. And it's not saying like, well, you use people. Listen, I was a booster for them too. We're both boosters in each other's lives. And that environment, that type of relationship creates, you got to pay attention to that too. You got to understand when a relationship has reached its course and the boosters are now they need to peel off, or the rocket can't get into the type of orbit that it intended to, or you're being held down and resentment will start to form. So just think about the environment that your friendships are creating, and are they actually serving you, and would it make more sense to move on from them without saying like, oh, but I've been friends 20 years. Oh man. Are you looking to hit your intended orbit or not? And it's not selfish and it's not mean. Your life depends on it. Your impact on the planet depends on it. Your mission, the entire vision you have, the purpose of your life depends on you making choices like that. Sometimes they're challenging, necessary though. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. The challenging thing is the key bit. Like this is not meant to be easy. We touched on this last time. Like if it was meant to be easy, everyone would be doing it already. The rewards, it's like everything in life, that the biggest rewards come at the end of the hardest paths.
Yeah.
And this, it'd be interesting to see if you agreed with this. Like, considering what I'd done in my previous life in the sort of traditional try and get to the top of the business world, entrepreneurship, grind, hustle, all of that. That was tough in a traditional sense. Doing this work, facing yourself, looking at your own darkness, taking, those moments where you take responsibility and you look at yourself and you have to go, nope, this is on me. When you're talking about tough work, that is the toughest work you can do.
Yes.
And that's why most people do not want to do it. And the number of people, I'm sure you experience this as well, inside your own family, friendship groups. And this is why, again, environments, you can't stay around the same people and expect to grow if they're not coming down this path with you. I love the thing about the rocket and the peeling away. It makes perfect sense. And I've had a very similar year with that sort of thing, and getting more and more at peace with that process, and being like, just because you used to be very close friends with somebody and now you're not anymore doesn't change the past. No. You still had a lovely, beautiful friendship. And when you reflect on things, I look at my parents and their generation. How many people are they still friends with now that they were friends with when they were 16? Very few. And they didn't go on the growth journey that you and I have been on. Right. When you've been on the growth journey that we've been on, it's inevitable that you're going to resonate with different types of people.
Yes.
Because as soon as you sit down with someone and they don't have an open mind, they don't have a growth mindset, with the best will in the world, you might have loved them when you were 20 years old. You might have had great nights out. Even I've given up drinking this year. I've been playing around with it for years. All of my old friends are heavy drinkers.
God.
So like the environments in which I would hang around with them are pubs and places where you drink. Now I can keep going to those environments. Yeah. But the chances of me living the life I want to live, which is alcohol free, and hanging around in those places, it reduces the chances of me being where I want to be.
Right. The intended orbit.
Exactly.
Those rocket boosters can't get you to the intended orbit.
Yeah.
Just is what it is. Well, dude, another great episode in the books, my friend. Another great episode.
Love talking to you as always.
Yeah, thanks, man. I purposely did not set an agenda. I just wanted to rap back and forth with you. I think we got some really great stuff out here, and the audience is really going to enjoy it. Paul, where can people find you, find your book, and anything else you're doing?
Best place to go now, and this has evolved over the year, but is just to go to the website. Very similar. We are very similar on this stuff. I know we are. I just want to get as much free stuff out to people as I can.
Yeah, me too.
And so the website is Paul with the number 7 cope.com. There's a tab on there, but if you put /free stuff, there's a page that just tells you all the free stuff you can get by joining my community, which is just joining the mailing list. You can unsubscribe at any time, but that gets you free book chapters, free training, There's more free content coming on social media as we speak, YouTube, podcasts, all that stuff. That's the best place to go and check it out. And
Love it, man.
From there, whatever you need.
It's nice to be in a container with somebody else who's fully committed to doing the work on themselves, and who doesn't sit on here and go, hey man, I've worked through all of it. I can tell your audience about anything. And I'm like, okay, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work too well. Because here's the thing, at every level that rocket gets to, at every level that you get to, you are going to see new stuff that you never saw before as the person that you were, right? You're never going to see at level 32, you're never going to see the stuff that you're going to see at level 38 when you're opening and constantly illuminating your life and the world around you. You're never going to see that stuff the same. You're always going to see it more clearly as you go, especially as you get higher too. The higher up you go, the more illuminated the ground becomes. So it's always enjoyable to chat with you, man. We're going to do a part 3. We'll do a part 3.
Yeah, anytime. Yeah. More than happy to come back anytime. As you said right at the start, and this is the funny thing about this stuff, isn't it? Especially when you're talking to someone who's got the exact same attitude to life, you can just talk endlessly.
Yeah.
And you can talk about the same thing a year later, and it's a different conversation anyway. So
different feel. Yeah, totally. So Paul, thanks for being here, man. Really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on again.
My pleasure. Audience, I hope you liked this episode. Make sure you go to iTunes or wherever you like, wherever you like to listen. Subscribe to the podcast. Give us a rating and a review. Make sure you check out menonpurpose.net for all things Men on Purpose, our free stuff, our community, our products, our coaching stuff, our mastermind stuff, our retreat stuff, everything on there, menonpurpose.net. We love you. We'll catch you on the next one.